Hello everyone, and I guess it's welcome back to The Green Man if you were with me a few moments ago as I started my countdown of my top 40 albums of all time. In that first video, I counted down from number 40 down to number 21. In this video, I'll be counting down from number 20 all the way down to my favourite album of all time and number 1 album of all time. Just to recap briefly on the rules here, the first rule I set myself when compiling this list was that the album had to be at least 3 years old to qualify for the list. The other rule is I cannot have more than 2 albums from the same artist, although for most of this list I've actually managed to select unique artists, I think, for the most part. But anyway, no reason to extend this intro any further than necessary since you've already had an intro in the first video for this countdown, so let's crack on. Number 20, Everg Grey, In Search of Truth. Love these guys. I love almost all their discography, I think, pretty much, to be honest. I've done an Everg Grey ranking in the not too distant past. This was my favourite album from them. I think it's pretty killer. Although it's an album actually that took a bit of time to grow on me. It's got a kind of their earlier gothic sound as well, which I love personally. But once this album sunk in, I just loved it more and more and more as the kind of years have gone by. Love In Search of Truth. That's my number 20. Number 19 might be a bit of a shock for any Alice in Chains fans out there, particularly if you are, just a fan of the Lane era. This may just ruffle a few feathers out there, but I'll explain. So Alice in Chains, Black Gives Way to Blue is my number 19, very high up. But I think this is a great, terribly underrated album, really underrated album. This is really good. Every track on here I absolutely love. And yes, it doesn't have Lane on it. But remember, I can pick 2 albums from the same artist, so stay tuned. But I love this album. I think it's kind of moving, it's emotional, as well as being hard-hitting and heavy. The production's really good on here. Really great Alice album. I think that this is just because of the timing, and it was after Lane passed away, obviously. I think that's the main reason. Otherwise, I do think this album would be held in so much higher regard. I really genuinely believe that. Number 18 is Paul Bearer and Foundations of Burden. Not going to talk too long about this album because it was on my top 10 metal list of all time. And yeah, I love this album. Paul Bearer kind of known as media darlings. This is what I always hear and everything. And it's kind of like, well, okay, but their music justifies, I think, a lot of the credit they get. I think they are a really great band, keep delivering great albums, so maybe that's why they're media darlings at the end of the day. I think Paul Bearer are a fantastic band, and I really love this album, Foundations of Burden. It's enchanting, it's beautiful, it's also crushing, with those crashing, thundering, big, booming chords, as well as the great building passages of melodies on here as well. I think this is a great album. Number 17 is Killswitch Engage, Alive or Just Breathing. Kind of tough to pick between this one, and actually I know I can pick 2 albums from the same artist, but I more or less picked mostly unique artists here. But anyway, I love this, and I was 17 when I discovered this, and it blew my mind. It was also an album which kind of got me a bit more, of an appreciation for harsh vocals from Jess's screams. I think Jess's screams are unbelievable. For me, I prefer Howard's singing, but I prefer Jess's screaming. And his screaming on this album is just... This is kind of raw as well, and the production just hits you so hard. And every track is a banger on here. I actually think, genuinely, there is not a single song I do not like here. What an album. Now we move on to number 16, which is Threshold, Legends of the Shires. An album that got me through a tricky time for me, 2017, for a lot of it. A lot of that year I found quite tough. But this album was always kind of, well, I guess it came out in September, but at that time I really needed something like this, and I thought it was just brilliant. Great songwriting from Threshold, as pretty much you always can expect from them. It's probably now it's my favourite album from them, and it comes in here at number 16. Number 15. I'm going to say it. I think this is a 10 out of 10 album for me. This is Pinkshiny Ultra Blast and Everything Else Matters. They are a shoegaze band. They're from Russia. This is absolutely, you know, think about being trapped in a euphoric moment and what that feels. Think about being in a euphoric moment in your life and what that feels like. This is like 40 minutes of being in that euphoric moment. It's like just amazing. This album sonically is, perhaps arguably sonically, just sound-wise, I think is just a really intriguing album to listen to. It may not settle in straight away, but once it does, you know, you're just transported to another place almost straight away. It's almost a kind of addicting sort of noise pop / shoegaze sound that they've got going here. It's a tremendous album, I think. And, you know, I cannot just listen to one track. I love to listen to this album in full for 40 minutes because, like I say, it's like being trapped in that euphoric moment just for 40 minutes and you just don't notice the time going by. We move on to number 14, Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory. No surprise maybe, because I did say this was the album that got me into metal. Well, it certainly led me to buying lots of metal albums back in the day. It was Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park. And I know there are those that hate on new metal, and I sort of get that. If you weren't growing up in the new metal time, maybe you would hate it. There was a lot of trashy albums coming out in that era, but not this. And I love the combo of Shinoda's rapping with Chester Bennington's great vocals, and the two of them here are just in top form. Might be a debut album, but it's just an amazing debut for me. The production is really solid. Again, not really a song I don't really like, I don't think. Of course, in the end, I've heard a few too many times, but this is a phenomenal new metal album. For me, it's the best that I've heard probably from the new metal era, as people like to call it. Next up, at number 13, a non-metal pick. This is Big Country, The Crossing. This is a band that, for me, they were sort of in the shadow of a lot of bigger bands at that time, like U2 and Simple Minds. They're kind of off the back of the new wave era. And this album, The Crossing, is, for me, it's a classic. It's a bit of an unknown classic, though. There's lots of really great tracks on here, very catchy. Their guitars are sort of tuned or played in such a way to sound a little bit like bagpipes. They're a Scottish band. Stuart Adamson, what a great frontman he was, and I love The Crossing. Favourite tracks on here, probably Chance, Fields of Fire, Porroman, lots of great songs on there. Coming on at number 12, I think we're at number 12 now, right? Always, Antisocialites. The album that, you know, really, this has sort of gathered importance for me because it was an album I got very close to during the lockdowns of the pandemic. So it's not an old album, it's probably actually, this is the most recent album that's the highest on my list of all-time albums. And I think that's simply because it played a role for me in helping me through the lockdowns, the early lockdowns in the pandemic. And it has that sort of significance. And I realised how much I love this band at that time probably as well. And for me, this is another one of those albums I would say is a 10 out of 10 for me. I know there are lots of people that disagree with that. But, you know, this one for me, lots of fantastic tracks. Again, songwriting is a great feature, is a real feature of this one. I love the whole band, you know, Molly and Alec and Kerry and just the whole band just do such a good job with this album. It's pretty short, but to me, I don't mind that it's pretty short. I mean, it's only just over half an hour, I think, if that. It is just truly, you know, fantastic stuff. You run out of adjectives eventually when you're doing these lists. When you're doing long lists, you start to run out of adjectives to describe these albums. Anyway, let's move on to number 11 now. I think this is the highest melodic death metal album. Is it the highest death metal album as well? I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have to, you know, as I go through my list. This is the Chain Heart Machine by Soilwork. Love that album cover as well. I think this album may have been a bit of a pathway into death metal as well for me, and that's another reason I love it so much. It's one of those important albums, hence why it's on the top all-time list for me. Absolutely ripping riffs, great guitar solos. In fact, the dual guitar stuff going on in this album is like none other. Bjorn sounds as good as ever with his harsh vocals on this album. This is front to back exhilarating. There we go, that's a good one. That's a good word I haven't used yet. Exhilarating. Coming in at number 10, we're into the top 10 now. We're going prog, going to Marillion, Clutching at Straws. From the Fish era, I do actually like the H era too, the Steve Hogarth era. You know, there are some great albums from his era, like Marbles, like Brave, like Afraid of Sunlight. But the Fish era and this album for me, they're still their crowning glory, because I love the lyrics on this album, the poetry, but also the music. It just all combines together to create one kind of haunting experience, telling a story of like somebody kind of, you know, looking back. And I really love this, and it's the poetry that gets me particularly. I think Fish was just, you know, what a poet he is. And yeah, that's my number 10. Number 9, if Josh Keach is watching this, Josh, if you're watching this, number 9 is Joe Satriani. Know you're a big fan of his, and The Extremist. I think this was also my number 1 pick in my ranking for Joe Satriani when I did an album ranking for him. Just everything is just right to me in this album for Joe. It's got like some of, for me, a lot of his best songs. The production's great. I love the Bissonette brothers and the contribution they made to this album. And the production and everything, I just really love this one. I think it's got some really good melodic guitar work as well in songs like Rubina's Blue Sky, Happiness and Crying. Yeah, I think this is awesome. And I got this on my 18th birthday. So there, you don't, you know, need to read too much into that to make the connection. That's also why it's pretty special, because it was an album I got on my 18th birthday. And I've never looked back. I love that one from my first listen. Now where are we at? Number 8. Blood Mounted by Masteron. Okay, not Crack the Sky. I know Crack the Sky will be the vast majority of Masteron fans' number 1 album, and that is a classic, a certified classic. I saw them on the tour when they were touring this album, and I just realised, first of all, how amazing Brandaler is as a drummer, but also how great Masteron are just generally. And I love this sort of really imaginative. This album to me is one of their most imaginative albums, I think, with some of the mad and more crazy technical guitar work on here from Brent and Bill as well. And it is just, I think it's magnificent stuff, and that's my number 8 choice. Move on to number 7 now. Dandelion by The Gathering. And this is just purely just spellbinding stuff. Spellbinding stuff from The Gathering. I just love this, and I think, you know, Anneke van Giersbergen's vocals speak for themselves almost, but in this album they work so well with all the music and the doomy passages. Her voice is kind of like a shining light against the great contrast to the sort of more melancholic and doomy and gloomy or sort of moments on this album. It's slightly alternative metal leaning, I think, at times. And they went more down that route as time went on, of course, going more down a rock route even in later albums. Yeah, Nighttime Birds is great as well, but I personally love Dandelion. Number 6, we move on to Thin Lizzy and Bad Reputation. Great album for me. I think I actually love all of Thin Lizzy's albums, pretty much. I mean, the debut maybe was a little bit of a slow one for me, but everything else is just fantastic. Great band. Yes, The Boys Are Back in Town is their most known song. They have so many great songs. People forget Thin Lizzy aren't a one-song band. They have so many great songs, so many great albums. This is probably my favourite from them. Phil Lynott is a legend, and this band are legendary. Love this album. Soldier of Fortune, Dancing in the Moonlight is a great song. Obviously the title track's amazing. Killer Without a Cause, that one's going to break your heart, so cool one. It's my number 6. Moving on to number 5. Megadeth, Rust in Peace, number 2 on my top 10 thrash metal albums of all time. That's a clue of what's to come as well. Yes, it is. Number 5, Rust in Peace. Not going to spend much time talking about this. I've just done that recently. You know, this is just technically a fantastic metal album. I think it was kind of one of the first albums that really, showed the talents of Marty Friedman and Dave Mustaine, especially. But it also, you know, was one of those early 90s albums that really showcased how technical metal can get, I think, as well. Rust in Peace. Number 4 is Master of Puppets by Metallica, my number 1 thrash metal album of all time. Again, not going to spend too much time on this. Just what is there more to say about this album than has already been said by so many people? I'm not sure what else I can say. It's an iconic metal album, and it is one of my favourites of all time. It's just front to back, amazing stuff. And this is also a 10 out of 10 for me. I don't know if I said that before in my list, in my other list, but 10 out of 10 album, perfect score. In fact, I wanted to say that's a 10 out of 10 as well, the Gathering album for me as well. I missed that one. Right, so let's move on to number 3. Dirt by Alice in Chains. Classic album. And there you go. There's just the only artist where I've picked a second album from them, because I could not pick Dirt. Dirt is a certified classic. There's actually a little bit of a lull in the middle of the album, so maybe I wouldn't actually score this 10 out of 10, but the reason it's so high, it means so much to me, this album. It just means a huge amount, like it probably does a lot of people. Lane is absolutely stellar on this album. He sounds phenomenal. And I remember watching the video for Wood on, maybe it was on MTV2 or something, it was a while back. And I loved the way he's kind of, you know, wearing those shades and it's looking really cool. And that chorus in this song is just spine-chilling. It gives me goosebumps still every time I listen to it. Can't remember how many times on Wood or how many times I listened to Wood, but it still gives me the chills. Then Bones Down That River, Rain When I Die, Sick Man. I love Angry Chair, Down in a Hole as well. I mean, yeah. Doesn't get much better than that. Number 2 won't be a surprise because this band had my number 1 song of all time. It's Iron Maiden's 7th Son of a 7th Son. Still have the stickers on some of these albums, don't I? And yeah, I've had this for a while. Yeah, just a classic Iron Maiden album. Again, perhaps don't need to say too much about this. I've done an Iron Maiden ranking as well, and I hope this was my number 1. It should have been. Yeah, 8 tracks of just glorious, kind of joyous Iron Maiden. Like, this is almost, I don't know if I go as far as to say it was happy as such, but it's kind of anthemic. And that's one of the reasons I really love it, because it's just so memorable and catchy, as well as being, I think, kind of just a thrill to listen to. That moves me on to my number 1 favourite album of all time. Here we go. It's going to be unveiled to you any second now. Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. And yeah, just love everything about this album. What it's about, you know, sort of the memory of Syd Barrett. The structure of the album I really love, with this sort of Shine On You Crazy Diamonds. The first parts of that, and then the later parts, part 6 to 9, I think, as the final part of the album. And that absolutely gorgeous bit of keyboard work from Rick Wright at the very end of that second part, or that last part of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, is just magical to me. In fact, it almost, you know, when I listen to that, it almost, you know, makes me want to shed a tear every time. It's so powerful in that part of the album. I love the middle part of the album, Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar and Wish You Were Here. Wish You Were Here is a classic. Obviously, that one's probably the most played song, obviously, from this album, and the most well known. But there you go. That's it. Is there anything else that now needs to be said? I don't know. Is this a bit of an anticlimax? That's it. That's my favourite albums of all time. Let me know yours in the comments as well. Obviously, you don't have to maybe compile a top 40 if you don't want to. Maybe just a top 5, a top 10. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, thanks all so much for watching. This list took a while to put together and to prep and to record, and probably it's going to take me a while to edit this now after I've done this. So anyway, thanks so much, guys. Until next time, it's bye for now.